All right, y'all, welcome to part 2. We're picking up with chapter 7 of the book, Cartoons, Cousins, and Crossroads. But before we get into it, let me take you back for a second, because before Milwaukee, before middle school, before the Cousins and Cartoons, there was Oakland, California. And let me tell you, life in Oakland was not easy. My world there was filled with constant movement, both mentally and emotionally. And my mom and I were in one of our tough seasons. I would say it's the kind of season where survival came before comfort, where the silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was loud with tension. And in this chapter, I introduced you to Ungrace, my angel in disguise, as I called her. Because Ungrace didn't knock, she didn't ask, she just showed up with purpose, as if God sent her on assignment. And when she saw me there, sitting in that house on the floor watching a small black and white TV, caught in the middle of everything, she knew I needed out. Not permanently, I think, but long enough really to breathe. And that moment changed everything. Because Aunt Grace's visit set in motion a move that gave me something I hadn't felt in a very long time, and that was stability. When I got to Milwaukee, everything shifted. I moved in with her where my cousins were, and suddenly I wasn't trying to survive anymore. I was laughing again, wrestling with them on the carpet, watching cartoons after school, shooting hoops back outside in the alley on crates, really just being a kid. And then there was Edison Middle School, where that became kind of an anchor, where it was a place where I saw the chaos stop, where the rhythm of school, friends, and family created something that looked like normal. But that's the thing about peace when you've grown up with instability. You never quite trust it. You learn to keep one eye open, to brace yourself for change. So I expected it. But there were two things that shaped this chapter. One was the trauma of transition, because I had to learn how to smile through newness while still carrying the weight of what I just left behind. Then the other thing was the illusion of permanence, because even joy felt borrowed during that time. So when I wrote this chapter, it really took me back to both of those places, the tension of Oakland and then the calm of Milwaukee. It reminded me how change can feel like rescue and loss at the same time. Cartoons, Cousins, and Crossroads isn't just about moving zip codes. It's about what happens when a child begins to believe they can exhale and then wonders if it'll last. This chapter opens part 2 of the journey, but we're really just getting started. So I invite you to keep watching, because what comes next dives even deeper. This is not just about movement anymore. It's about the weight we carry when we try to rebuild. Stay tuned. All right, hey y'all, we are back with our second chapter in part 2 of the Oakland Hills Milwaukee River series. And I want to talk to you specifically about chapter 8, Seasons Change, because this chapter is personal. Because it wasn't just about the weather changing. It was about my whole life shifting. I had to move from Oakland to Milwaukee. And although the change was necessary, I'll be real with you, it was not easy. Oakland was home. In Oakland, I knew the beat, I knew the culture, and I knew the rhythm of the streets. But then suddenly I was dropped into a whole new space, a whole new city where it was cold, it was quiet, and unfamiliar. So in this chapter, I shared how I felt walking into a space where nobody knew my name. No one knew who I was, my background, or nothing. But I was now in their world, and whether they welcomed me or not, I had to find a way to exist in it. Have you ever walked into a space like that? It doesn't always feel good. And honestly, it can make you question yourself. But that's what I unpacked here. How I had to learn to adapt. to figure out who I was outside of what I was used to. Two big themes show up in this chapter. The first was cultural disruption, the shock of losing your familiar and being expected to instantly adjust. The second was resilience through reinvention, learning to navigate new terrain while holding on to who you are. Writing this chapter made me reflect on how uncomfortable growth can be, but then also how necessary it is. I learned how to observe more, how to listen more, how to find strength in silence. Milwaukee, I would say, really slowed me down, even as a kid, because it made me look inward. And it taught me that even when life uproots you, you can still bloom. So if you're like me, if you ever felt out of place, if you've ever had to figure out how to fit in without losing yourself, this chapter is for you to read. Seasons change reminds us that just because the environment shifts, it doesn't mean that we can't still find our rhythm. We end up discovering that we might just have to write a new one. So stay tuned and check out what our next chapter has in store for you. All right, welcome back, y'all. Thanks for joining me again. I want to say it's great to have you a part of this experience, and this chapter will be the last one for our part 2 of the Oakland Hills Milwaukee River series. But don't worry, part 3 is coming shortly. This chapter, right here, chapter 13, The Weight of Regret, is very sacred to me. It's not just a story I wrote, it's a wound I reopened. In this chapter, I invite you into one of the most tender and personal memories of my life. It's about Ariana. Someone who came into my life at a time when I wasn't looking for love, but somehow found it anyway. Our timing had always been just a little off, but in our senior year of high school, it finally clicked. Prom night was unforgettable. Her parents welcomed me. She was radiant. And for a moment, it felt like life was giving me something steady, something real. But then life shifted and we graduated. And she moved into the dorms and I stayed behind grinding, working, and commuting to school. And in the middle of that distance, something ended up happening. She called me one night. Her voice was trembling and she told me the truth. A decision she made at a party. And in that moment, I shut down. Eventually, she ended up coming to my house. She ended up sitting on the floor while I was cooking and asked me to see beyond the mistakes she made. But my pride, it ended up building a wall between us. Now, I won't tell you how it ends. You'll have to read the book yourself. But I will tell you this. It's not the kind of goodbye you prepare for. And it's not one you ever forget. Two powerful things run through this chapter. One was the fragility of timing. Sometimes love arrives exactly when we're not ready to receive it, and we don't always get a second chance. And then the second thing was the burden of unforgiveness. Not towards others, but the weight we carry when we can't forgive ourselves for how we handle something or someone. Ariana was honest and I was human. But sometimes being human comes with consequences we live long after the moment has passed. As an author, writing this chapter was more than emotional. It was sobering. Because it made me face myself. Not the version of me who speaks or teaches or leads, but the younger me who didn't know how to hold love with both of my hands. This version made me look at that and look at my ego and my ability to have empathy. And it made me wonder how many of us are walking around with unspoken regrets. How many stories go untold to tell them? So I wrote this chapter for Ariana, for myself, and for anyone who needs to be reminded that forgiveness, while it may not change the past, can free the future. So read the chapter. Let it speak to you, because there's a little bit of all of us in the weight that we carry. And when you're ready, I'll meet you in part 3, where we share what chapter 15 is about.